What has been your biggest homesteading failure to date? I'll give you a minute to think. Was it some kind of livestock that just didn't work out for you? Did you try to start a garden and it just failed miserably? Leave us a comment either on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, you can click the link, head over to our website and leave a comment at the website. Leave us a comment. What was your biggest failure to date? I'd say ours to date has been running a successful goat dairy. We've owned over 20 goats. We've attempted multiple times to milk them, and we have yet to be really successful at doing this. Hopefully my daughter can carry the torch and make it happen. For Misty, their first big failure was blueberries.
When we came out here, we really wanted a blueberry farm. The reason we love blueberry picking is because we went to a blueberry farm, and that was the first place that we took our little girl. She was 17 months old. We were pregnant with our second. We took her, and she just was a toddler, just pulling berries off. They're right that age where it's just kind of magical for a little kid to think food is growing off of this that I can eat, that I can have. And it's just so fun to do that. And so that was just a tradition of ours every year to take our kids there. And I think that we just loved it because our experiences on blueberry farms were, just super, super fun to do with our kids. And we kind of wanted to recreate that at our own house.
And so that's what they did. Misty and her husband Clay, brand new starry-eyed farmers, bought a little piece of earth and started a incredibly successful blueberry farm, right? That's how this story goes. That's how all new farmer stories go, right? Yeah.
We've had the worst of luck with creating a blueberry farm. It's not even in the dreams. I'm happy to go to our neighbor's blueberry farm now and just pick there.
Misty and Clay did not have great success out the gate with their brand new blueberry farm. But that early learned lesson would eventually shape their whole outlook on homesteading.
It's a thing that we say in our family. It takes a decade of good decisions before you see the fruit. You plant a field of corn and the raccoons eat it. And so you figure out how to deal with the raccoons, and then you figure out how to deal with this or that. But it feels like you're always problem solving, or at least it did for us in those early days. It felt like we were problem solving. And then one day we kind of looked up and it's like, hey.
Do you feel like lately your homestead life has been a lot of failures? Are you newer at this and you've been struggling? Have you been doing it a couple years but you hit a rough patch? Honestly, I felt that way about a month ago. We just had one of those weeks where everything was going wrong. And then I looked up and hey, our entire patch of experimental sunflowers was growing. It's the middle of summer for a lot of us. I know that means we've been working hard all spring into the heat of the summer. I know some of you listening are probably starting to feel tired, maybe worn out, maybe seeing some mistakes made along the way already this season. Today's episode, we're all going to pause. We're going to look up and we're going to see where as Misty and Clay refer to it,
a decade of good decisions.
Decade of good decisions may lead us. We'll learn where it led them.
And we realize that something in all of the thick of all the work and all the challenge and all the pressure and the difficulty, that we were actually really building something, really wonderful.
Hopefully by the end of listening to this episode, you'll be able to look up on your own homestead and find something truly wonderful. At least you'll be inspired to keep going until you do. The world that we live in is a crazy place.
This is a pandemic.
And a toilet paper tussle.
Inflation hitting a new...
They're protesting.
But you and me, we can make a difference. By just starting a garden, harvesting rainwater, raising some meat chickens with a couple of friends. All these little steps, bit by bit, it makes life better for you, me, and our kids. So if you've wanted to start homesteading, or maybe just grow your homestead a little bit bigger this year, well, you found the right podcast. Cozy up, it's time for another episode of Homesteady. Just a quick reminder, all of our Homesteady podcast episodes that appear here on iTunes or on YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening, are edited versions of the full-length interview, which winds up in the Pioneer Library. If you're a Homesteady Pioneer, click the link that either popped up on your screen or is in the description below so you can listen to the full-length version of this episode. And if you're not a Pioneer but you want access to all the full-length, unedited versions and our classes, courses, videos, and everything else that is there just for Pioneers, click the link below that says Become a Pioneer. We'd love to have you join. So, Misty, I've been following you on social media, and I've been following your husband. I've been listening to his podcast. I know a lot about you guys and what you're up to. But for our audience who's maybe new to you, has never seen what you're up to, give us a little virtual, digital version of the tour of your homestead. If we were to fly a drone over Newcomb Farm, what would we see right now today?
Okay, today what you would see is we have 7 acres. 5 of them are pretty much wooded, and there's trees and wild animals and things like that, but nothing, it's completely untamed in 5 of the acres. 2 of the acres you would see a couple of mules on those acres, and that's about the maximum that those acres can take, combined with everything else we have in terms of large livestock. We do have a couple pigs. At this point, we have 30-ish chickens, give or take one, given how, whatever the predators are doing. That's more chickens than we really want or need, but that's, I went a little overboard after a really hard winter with predators. And then you would see a really big garden, that garden that we have a family of 6. We have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. The girls are in and out because they both live out of state right now. And you would see, a lot of activity.
You guys, you look at your homestead, where it's at now, and all the things you're doing, and it looks like you're old pros who've been doing this forever. Did either of you grow up in like an agricultural life, any kind of farming, any kind of homesteading?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a town of 410 people in southern Arkansas, and it would be difficult to say that anyone there was not surrounded by an agricultural life. It was very rural. Clay lived not too far, a little bit bigger town, about 5,000 people. And where we're from, there's just a lot of agrarian types of activities, a lot of chicken farms. You're definitely surrounded by agriculture. My parents and his parents, neither one of us had parents who farmed. The primary reason that my family didn't farm is because their families were all farmers. The people who most influenced me in terms of wanting a garden would probably be my great-grandparents on my dad's side of the family. And because his mom was sick, they spent a lot of time with him, and he would say he was at least partially raised by them. And we'd go to their house and visit, and they always had just a gigantic garden. They were raised in the Depression era, so they were very, very conscientious about consumption and about using their resources well. And so their house was just kind of this amazing place that had, a catfish pond and had berries that they had transplanted. And as a kid, it felt like I was going somewhere almost magical. They had blackberries that were just gigantic, and as far as the eye could see in the back behind their house. More than anything, I think they influenced me because they loved their farm and they loved their garden, and it was just a special place to them. And so I think even though my parents were kind of like, no, that life is not for us, we're not interested in weeding or working in the hot southern Arkansas sun, I didn't see that part of it. I didn't see the unpleasant side of it. I saw people who just really loved their garden and love spending time outside. My grandparents would bring us food. So my mom loved the food that a garden produced, right? So they would bring us bread sacks full of black-eyed peas, purple peas, squash, corn. And it was always like a big feast at our house when they did that, because my mom loved cooking for her family. But there was we tried one garden in my whole life, and it was eaten up by ants. And it was not a positive experience. So it was definitely not something that neither Clay nor my family had any direct experience with. We got married 22 years ago, and we moved from the Washita's to the Ozarks to go to school in Fayetteville. And Clay was a big hunter. his grandpa was a big bird hunter. His dad was a big bow hunter and hunted primarily deer. And by the time I met Clay, in the late 90s, he was very well on the track of hunting. It was really kind of a culture shock to me. And it's kind of funny because I grew up, there were hunters all around, but I just wasn't close to them. And I didn't really I didn't get it, and my family didn't get it. And so it wasn't something that I really understood. And when I first met Clay and he said he was a hunter, I kind of joke about it. I was like, oh man. And one of the things as we were starting our family, we lived in an apartment for about 8 months and pretty quickly moved out of there because Clay was like, I need some space. He needed to be able to shoot his bow and arrow. So when we moved to our first little rental house, not too far outside, it was in the country, and it was, there was something about it that just sort of made really he started it, but just made him want to start a garden. And I loved going out there with him, but he did the hard work. And we would, we had our first child at that house, and he always talked about how important it was to him that we be authentic in how we lived our life, right? So he was a big hunter, and he didn't want to hunt and just give away the meat, which is, or just use it, for a party chili or something like that.
Yeah.
He really wanted our family to eat the meat and consume the meat. And that was kind of from the very beginning of our marriage. That was something that was real important to him. And it really was not something that I was really prepared to eat either. I was a real finicky eater, and I didn't really want to deal with this.
So here you have Misty, who comes from a non-hunting background, who is a picky eater and isn't really excited about trying wild game. And at the same time, Clay, who is a hunter, whose family has a tradition of hunting, and he wants to use the meat not just to give away or to give to friends, but to be a core on their family table. How are they going to find middle ground here?
I had dealt with some sickness right whenever we got married. I had traveled and gotten really sick internationally, and came back and had a difficult time getting over it. I was anemic, I was sick, and one of the things I read talked about just wild game as being more iron dense or more rich in iron. And so, I was motivated for a lot of different reasons to try it, and found that, found some form of health inside of natural remedies. We were young and in college and just evaluating everything, and I started getting super interested in just the impact that food and what we consume and chemicals and all that kind of stuff has on our bodies, because I saw kind of firsthand the healing power that some more natural remedies had as compared to, more of a medical mindset. And of course, we go to the doctor, we don't have any problem with that, but I just was kind of intrigued with I was never really taught that much about, food and family dinner was really important to us, but as far as processed food versus not processed food, I'm a good Southern girl, and almost every meal probably had a can of cream of mushroom. And so this was, that sort of mindset was something that was kind of new to me, and I was really interested. And of course, we're talking about meat harvested in the woods. That's about as organic as you can get. And so it kind of fit. And it was just something that we sort of connected on as young people starting our family. We moved out here in 2005 where we live now. And when we moved here, it was kind of like a step towards, we had kind of stayed outside of the big city where we're located, but the Ozarks became home for us. And when we moved out here in 2005, by that time we had a couple little girls, and actually we had 3 kids. Our son was a couple months old, and we were looking for land. And when we found land that we could afford, all 7 acres of it, it was we wanted to use it, and we wanted to do things with it. And we'd had this small garden at every little rental property that we had. Every place we lived, we were able to, get a couple tomatoes or whatever. But when we moved out here, when we closed on that property, I bought Story's Book of Country Seals and found it just totally inspirational. Clay was, building the house and contracting it out, and I was at home reading that. We wanted to make sure we were grandfathered in as an agricultural property, so we bought a goat named David, and we camped him here, and we would bring the kids down to watch the progress and visit with the goat. Never really got too far into goat farming. He was not a very kind goat.
like most goats.
But anyway, so that was kind of where we got started. It wasn't super clean cut, it was kind of messy, just to be real honest. We came out here with big hopes and dreams, and raccoons ate all of our corn, and deer ate all of our, all of our produce, and we had a well, and it wasn't great, and it would consistently run out in August, and all the blueberries would die. I mean, we tried over and over. We tried a couple different things, and finally we were just like, this is dumb. We are spending an enormous amount of money to get 4 berries every year. And maybe we're not supposed to have a blueberry farm. It was definitely just the survival of the fittest sort of thing. We can't make this thing work. And so we gradually just had more success with other things. We had 3 kids at that time, under age 3. And then we had our 4th within a year or 2 of that. So we had 4 kids in 5 years. And it was it was a lot. And we were still kind of really in the formative years of our marriage, learning how to partner together, learning all those skills as well.
They didn't know it at the time, but they were building the process in which they would grow their homestead over the years.
I think just starting small and not trying to be too perfectionistic about things. It's easy, I think, people who are connected to their food source, there's almost like it's a value. And when something's a value, it's easy to put it in terms of like moral absolutes. Like, I must grow all my food, and it must be grown organically, and it must be, and if it's not done that way, then it's wrong. And I think it's important to, relax just a little bit and say, we're going to take steps towards having a pure, more whole food system inside of our home. And I think that that's kind of what has brought us here, is that you can look at it now, and like you said, it really is a nice, we're sourcing a lot of our own food. An enormous amount of our own food. And the meals we eat are very holistic, and we're connected to the source of the vast majority of the food that we eat here. However, we go out to eat. We have kids that have basketball games or busy schedules sometimes where we're not able to do that. And we don't beat ourselves up about that. I don't, my lines are not super straight in the garden. It's a little wild out there. And there's a lot of things, sometimes people will come and say, well, that's not the right way to do it. And I'm like, I don't know that there is a right way to do it. There are some things that are just moral absolutes. I'm not sure that how I structure my garden is one of those things. There are things that work for you in different seasons, and so just take what you can in every season that you're in and build on that. Let life be something that you build upon day after day, line upon line, and that's how you end up with something that's majority sourced from your own place.
Misty and Clay were growing a lot, they were learning a lot, but as life often does, there were changes coming their way, and changes for their homestead too.
There was a season where we always had a small garden, but there were several years where we didn't, when the predators came and got the chickens one year, or whenever, one by one they died off and we didn't have any more chickens. It was just like, I don't feel like we should do that right now. I think the coop is, we should just move it off to the side for right now. And it was just kind of a sense of like, that's not where the emphasis is for our life right now. We really need to focus on these kids, and our, at times it was kids and jobs. Kids are always in there, they're always, once you have them, they're always a priority area. But so we kind of just would go with that and move with the different seasons. And Clay had started a business. He was landscaping. I was finishing up school because, my path had gotten a little messy just having kids. So once I finished school, I went to work in 2009, and we kept the garden, but the chickens, I think our last herd of chickens for a while was in 2012. I started I started working for, I was actually the founding director of a private school here in Northwest Arkansas. And when that started, it just consumed so much of my time that as those chickens, died and went on, we didn't renew them for a little while.
This is, I think, one of the highlights of my interview with Misty. Something I took away was how in a lifetime of small farming or homesteading, we go through different stages, different changes. It made me think of the path of the butterfly. We all know the butterfly starts off as a caterpillar. Maybe you remember from school, I know I did, probably most millennials had this class where the teacher got a butterfly, maybe a monarch butterfly caterpillar for us, a group of them, and we watched the caterpillars eat leaves and crawl around the little box. And then they created their little, what is that thing called? What does a caterpillar go in? Help me out here. It goes into chrysalis. How did I forget? Public school right there. The caterpillar forms that chrysalis, and we see that little hanging chrysalis. One day you come into class and suddenly the caterpillar is gone and there's just this little mysterious little sack, and we wait, days and days go by, and then suddenly we see this beautiful monarch butterfly flapping around our little terrarium, and we release it into the wild. Honestly, the most fascinating part of that whole transformation is what we don't see inside of that little mysterious chrysalis. Inside, that caterpillar is not growing wings out of its caterpillar body. It's becoming dissolved, literally turning into a strange caterpillar jello that then reforms into a whole new shape of a creature, a whole new kind of a creature that can do things the caterpillar never could, like fly. And it emerges as something beautiful and incredible that can do even more than that caterpillar could ever dream of. I think most homesteaders, they go through a goo phase. If you homestead long enough, your life will throw changes at you that at some point make you deconstruct the homestead that you've worked so hard on. Maybe it's paring down, selling off some of your favorite livestock because you have to simplify. Maybe you stop altogether to the point where you no longer resemble the caterpillar-like homesteader that you were in the first place. You just look like a bunch of goo. We may shrink down, pare down. We may become a goo that doesn't resemble homesteading in hardly any way. And time may pass, and to the outside world, we may appear to be nothing like a homesteader. But I think this homesteader way of life is something that stays growing inside of ourselves, inside our brains. We're constantly thinking of how we could get back to that and do more and produce more and grow more. And a lot of us go through these periods where we come out of our chrysalis and blossom into these beautiful butterfly homesteaders. I know Kay and I, over the last decade plus of homesteading, have pared down and shrunk down to time periods where even on our YouTube channel, we would get comments like, "You guys aren't even homesteaders anymore." And now we're producing more than we ever have, and we have more animals than we ever have. That's what happened at the Newcomb farm.
And then as our kids got older, we always kept the garden going. That was something that's kind of been a constant, and Clay kind of tended that. But our kids got older, our careers kind of they got tamed themselves, and we weren't pushing so hard, building the formative years of our careers as well. And when all that happened, we realized, hey, we've got some time in the day, and we just sort of naturally migrated to bringing back the chickens and then building up the garden a little bit bigger.
After life took them into a path where they shrunk down, they emerged bigger and brighter, and now the farm that you see is the most beautiful butterfly version of their homesteading life.
when Clay does the garden, we have tomatoes and corn. When I do the garden, it's kind of on steroids. And so I took that back over after the school got settled and our kids got a little older. And that's, we've just kind of built on it every year a little bit more until where we're at now. I remember in 2017, I was talking to Clay and just was like, I want to take back on the garden. I want to do it this way. I want to make sure some of the problems that we had before are dealt with. So we fenced it in, we raised it up, we put some work into making sure that the raccoons and the deer couldn't get to it. Got some hound dogs, and they cure number one for raccoons is have a couple raccoon dogs running around or squirrel dogs running around. That seems to deal with that problem. But we try to just be kind of fluid and still and really listen to our hearts and to where we feel divinely led.
So as you guys have built this over the years and grown and shrunk different areas, what has become, it sounds like to you it's the garden for you personally. Is that when you look at your farm and the biggest area of production, is it the garden? What is your guys' focus now? I find after a decade, a homestead really finds its, you might, have a couple things going on, but there's something that you just hone in on.
I think for me, it's food that we put on our table. And so that's garden chickens for eggs and for Clay and the kids hunting. I mean, Clay and the kids will come out. They'll help me. The girls like to come out to the garden to talk to me and just spend time. The boys sometimes are recruited to come out and talk to me and spend time and help me build things and help me put things up. But so for me, definitely, I would say the garden. Our 3 out of 4 of our kids really love to hunt as well. And so for Clay and those 3 kids, there's a lot of attention given to hunting. And Clay comes out to the garden, he weeds with me. There's always that. It's always there for us waiting. So he'll come out, and we'll spend time out there in the evenings, but definitely the garden is not the thing he's passionate about, but and there's not a single fruit. We're not a blueberry farm. We're not monocroppers. We're trying to grow diverse food that'll last all year long. One of the things I saw my great grandparents do that I really kind of meant a lot to me is they were fun. You would pull up to their house. I remember one time pulling up with my dad, and my great grandpa was standing out there just smiling. He was alone, just smiling, looking at something. And my dad said, "What did he grow now?" And we went out there, and he had grown 4 little cotton plants, not a row, just 4 little plants. And there was cotton on them. And I remember I was probably first grade, and I remember looking that's what cotton looks like, and being real surprised by what it looked like. And he just was laughing, and he said, "They say you can't grow cotton in this part of the state." And it was kind of funny. He grew it just to say he could. That's the only reason he did it.
So cool.
Just to say what they said was wrong. He would grow purple broccoli. He would grow, he just grow funny things. Once he grew watermelon on a trellis, and he tied it up with pantyhose. And he wanted all of us to eat the watermelon under that trellis because he was so proud of this idea he had or this thing he saw somewhere. And so we had to eat it right there. So I think I saw him just loving the food he grew. And that's kind of what I want. I'm not growing to sell. I'm growing to feed my family. And I want to feed them food that I trust and food that I touched and I helped cultivate. And I love putting that kind of food on my table. And so that's the main thing. I say all that, and I will say purple whole peas have kind of become a Newcomb farm thing, a thing that we love to grow. And it's because we have people over to the house to shell them with us. And it usually becomes a big community thing. When they are dry, when the beans are dry, you know how it is when you have your garden, especially in the South where you can have a couple of seasons, crammed into one. You're kind of trying to turn things over pretty quickly. So if your peas are ready to harvest, you pull those off. And so by the time people come here, usually we've already got it pulled off on and in buckets. And we have a covered porch and stairs. It always happens late July, early August. And, we usually have a get-together here. When we moved to this house, we knew that, our lives were situated inside of the context of community, and we wanted the community to be a big part of our life. And so it was actually a big deal to us, like, can we have a lot of people here at this house? Can we have people out in the front yard? And so it's not uncommon for us to have get-togethers, and without a doubt, if a get-together happens in July or August, we're going to pull out the peas and people are going to start shelling them. And it's fun. Like, you'll see just people sitting on the stairs of our front porch, and sitting we have some benches on our covered front porch, and everybody just shells, and you put a big bucket in the middle and you just go through them and talk.
Now, you mentioned you guys both still have full-time jobs, right? So
Yeah.
up to this point, we're hearing all that's going on the farm, but now, you actually both have full-time work. What do you guys do professionally off the farm, and then how do you balance all that?
Yeah. So Clay, and like you said, you follow him on Meat Eater. He runs the Bear Grease podcast for Meat Eater, and he works full time for Meat Eater. A lot of the work that he does, he probably is traveling a couple days a week, just gathering, doing interviews with people, gathering information. He does some of the editing. So he has an office. Before he worked at Meat Eater, he ran a magazine called Bear Hunting Magazine, and so he kept that headquarters up. But he travels, and he does a lot of things. One of those things, fortunately, is hunting, and that's part of his job. So that's a really great thing for us. We never, in our wildest imagination, thought that would happen, that this would actually become something that he could do professionally, but here he is doing it. And so that's probably the easiest way to say he integrates his life with hunting, is that he actually does this professionally. And so his job actually takes him to places during the different hunting seasons that we probably wouldn't be able to go if he didn't work there. So that's that. For me, I think it kind of all goes back to we do this because we love it, and we do this because, I'm going to feed my family some way, right? And so I want to feed them these good, strong ingredients, food that I've sourced, that I have some connection to. That's just a priority for us. With meat, that's taken care of. When it comes to the garden, I wake up early. I find that it's good for me to spend a little bit of time out there and just kind of I have a morning routine of going and feeding the animals before we go to work. The summer times, my job is I work for a school, and so you have this built-in flex time. It's still busy. In my particular role, it's a year-round role, and so it's still busy, but it's more flexible in the summertime, which is just perfect timing for me, because it means that if I need to start an hour later, because like this week I'm not going outside at 5 p.m. because it's going to get up to 100 this week in Arkansas, and I'm not doing that. And so I can start work an hour or two later, and that's a really nice asset. But I also just think it goes back to just understanding, like, life is integrated. That's our goal, is that life would be, there's not this concept of, we need work-life balance where one thing pulls from the other, but this is life. This is the areas that God has an emphasis on in our life right now. Certainly raising our kids is one of those things. Helping facilitate they're all teenagers, and they're becoming who they are, and some of them have passions and interests that we have to help facilitate. And when they were younger, they didn't. We weren't part of all the sports programs and stuff like that when they were younger. But one of our sons is an athlete, and so that requires all the practices and all that. So it just is a matter of saying, okay, life is life, and here's the areas of emphasis that we have with our church, with our community, with our kids, with our garden, with our work, and we run week to week, just kind of like we run year to year, and that is, what's the emphasis this week? What should we put our weight on this week? And obviously we're going to have to show up to work every day, and we're going to have to feed our kids every day. So let's, do those things. But then what else can we fit in? And because this is something that we love, and it's not work in that sense that it's like this drudgery, some nights I don't want to go out and weed, but I do, because I want the fruit of of what weeding will produce. And so in the evenings we go out there together. A lot of times as a family, at this age, it's not uncommon for our kids, and at the age that your kids are, this is probably really wild to think about, but it's not crazy for us to have evenings where no one is home or no one is unoccupied. Everyone's busy. Everyone's and they're often able to drive themselves to where they need to go. And so, Clay and I will go outside and work. He'll train mules. I'll work in the garden. We'll holler at each other across the fence. It's kind of a new different season, but it's just living life inside of balance, but also not being too crazy about what we're doing. I'm not super perfectionistic about how we run things, and we try to run the garden in a way that it is self-sustaining. Once it gets going, like this time of year, I walked out there yesterday and I was just so happy because everything is tall enough and planted close enough together that there's not like a lot of rows for me to weed. Everything is going to be kind of self-weeding from this point throughout the year. So we do try to design it so that it's not super intense, because in July my schedule will pick way up, and I won't be able to have as much free time as I have right now. And so I kind of know those seasons and what life is like, and just try to build inside the different constraints of every season.
So I found you I've been following Meat Eater back when it was just a podcast. I was following Meat Eater, and I stumbled across you when you were welcome to the Meat Eater family. And I was really excited because Meat Eater for so long has been hunting, which I love. Hunting is a big passion. Yeah. I'm pointing to, there's a deer skull behind me. I know you can't see it right now, but there's a big deer skull hanging on the wall behind me. But I was really excited to see kind of the farming and the homesteading thing come to Meat Eater. But what really made me say, oh man, I want to get her on the show, was you made a comment about how the journey to get you to where you guys are here was something along the lines of, you said like a decade of, was it a decade of like?
It takes a decade. It's a thing that we say in our family. It takes a decade of good decisions before you see the fruit. And that came because, we got married in 2000 and we moved out here in 2005. And I could just tell you, like, life was, we were married young, we had kids young, we started a business, we, started a little farm, and we were trying to do a whole lot of different things at once, and it put pressure on our relationship, and it does. Like when you're in this sort of, and I mean, I don't know any sort of lifestyle that doesn't, anyone that can control pressure around their relationship. So you might as well have that pressure be something you like. That's good, yeah. Pressure's always there. And so we were really learning how to walk through things, and we were making choices, and it was like, we don't really see the fruit of any of this. Like, you plant a field of corn and the raccoons eat it. And so you figure out how to deal with the raccoons, and then you figure out how to deal with this or that. But it feels like you're always problem solving, or at least it did for us in those early days. It felt like we were problem solving. And then one day we kind of looked up, and it's like, hey, we've got kids that are going to school and a little bit more independent. Everybody can tie their shoes, go on hikes without, being carried. There's all these things that all of a sudden we could do, and we realized that something in all of the thick of all the work and all the challenge and all the pressure and the difficulty, that we were actually really building something really wonderful that we were really grateful for, and that's something that we realize, okay, when you're really building something important, you don't see results overnight. You don't see the fruit right away. We've got older kids now who are going into college, and we keep telling them, this is a season of your life where you're going to have to make decisions, and you've got to base them on our value system, and you've got to base them on what you believe, but you're not necessarily going to get just all the benefit of that immediately. There will be students in your class who are cheating on exams and get higher scores than you, and you're not going to cheat, and you might not get that great score, but it's building something in you. It's building integrity, and it's building mass inside of you. And so make the hard decisions, make the difficult choices that are aligned with your values, and in 10 years from now, that stuff is going to be producing fruit. And the other stuff, the people who aren't making choices aligned with that, it will produce fruit for them too. And it just may not be the fruit they want. and so that's a really important concept in our home. So what we say is it takes a decade of good decisions before you see the fruit.
You guys are doing so much cool stuff, Misty, between you and your husband, the different things, different projects you work on. working on, and now you have been welcomed to the Meat Eater world. If someone's really enjoyed this interview and they want to keep following your story and what you guys are up to, what's the best place where they can find you, and what are you putting out each week?
You can go to Newcomb Farm, the Instagram page, Newcomb Farm, at Newcomb Farm, and you'll get information about our garden. You'll see our harvest, our hunting harvest. Clay Newcomb also has an Instagram account, so you can check him out. Clay runs a podcast called the Bear Grease Podcast. You can subscribe on that at iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you could find the Bear Grease Podcast. It's not exclusively hunting, it's more of a wilderness podcast, and talks about wilderness and rural culture a whole lot. That's how I'd probably summarize it, but there's a good dose of hunting in there as well. And then Wild and Whole is a new branch of Meat Eater that really focuses less on hunting, but more on, in general, food that is sourced either from your garden. It does, you'll see recipes on there from wild game and things like that, but that's not the exclusive focus of Wild and Whole. They're looking at all sorts of foods, whether it's foraging or gardening, and they do also have recipes for hunters in there as well. So those would be the places I would look.
I gotta say, your husband's podcast, I've been following Meat Eater since it was just Steve Ranella doing a podcast by himself, and all the different offs and everything. I really like what he does with Bear Grease, because our show's a highly edited show. We put a lot of time into how we create the end product and bring in music and bring in different voices and narrative. And that's the kind of experience you get with Bear Grease. So if you like Homesteady, I say go check out Bear Grease for sure. And the episode that I really liked, that I'd suggest people go start with if you're a Homesteady listener, Clay did one all about soil, which he had Grant Woods on there. He was talking about, it's just really good. So that great show. Clay does a really nice job with that. And I was just so thrilled when I saw they brought you on to Meat Eater. Meat Eater, who's obviously a big leader in the hunting world, start bringing in some more of these homesteads and family farms like what you guys are doing there. That's why when I saw you join, I was like, I got to see if I can get Misty on. Thank you so much for coming on. I think this
thanks for having me.
It'll be so helpful for people, whether they're in that cultivating in the beginning stage, or they're starting their journey, or even years into it. It's just so much good advice here. Any parting encouragement to someone who is back at that beginning, Misty, square one, they're in the cultivating their love stage like you talked about. Any advice how to get onto that path of a decade's worth of good decisions?
Yeah, do something. A small, 4x4 raised bed. Nothing's too small to start. So just start. Even if it's just going to the neighborhood blueberry farm and picking, just start.
There's no better way to end the episode than with that. Just start. So if you want to just start, we have a free Start Homesteading Today course over at our website. This is homesteady.com. On the homepage, there's a button that says join us. You'll join the email list. It will send you an invitation to take our Start Homesteading Today course. Again, it's a free video course. I hope it helps you get started. And until next time, remember, the road is rocky. Make home steady.